Welcome. My name is Margaret Kingsland, and I'm happy to be here in conjunction with the Missoula Peace Network to talk with you in a program called Voices from the Middle East. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues from Hellgate High School. To my immediate left is Tom Graff, and to his left, Robin Hamilton. And all three of us are literary critics of various kinds, and so we're going to be talking together about some unusual literature which many Americans have not read, but which we hope you'll find of interest. As I said, this program is called Voices from the Middle East, and what I hope to do in this hour is to give you a brief overview of some of the diverse forms of literature from a part of the world that we don't study often enough, but particularly because we have allies and so-called adversaries in the Middle East at this time. I think it behooves us to give special attention to attempting to understand and imagine the otherness of peoples of that part of the world. And so I intend this program as a respectful acknowledgement of different kinds of voices from that part of the world. I appreciate Tom and Robin's joining me in the effort for us all to get some deeper understanding of where they're coming from and how we as North Americans relate to people from the Middle East. I'd like to start by giving a very quick overview of the history of the Middle East, and then we'll be doing some readings and having some conversations about those readings. This program was generated initially in response to the conflict with Iraq this winter, and I want to give a note of appreciation to the Student Coalition for Social Responsibility, which organized a series of sessions on the Middle East. This series of readings was originally part of that session. Iraq, as you know, is part of the Middle East, but it's not the only country, it's a huge, wide part of the world, as you know from your maps on other television stations that you've seen as the war coverage was available to us over the winter. And the true nations of the Middle East, which have very long and ancient histories and which we all recognize, are Egypt, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Lebanon, Turkey, and Israel. Iraq is in the area of the world which was ancient Sumer and Mesopotamia. And its history reaches back more than 10,000 years, as you know, as does the history of human civilization in that part of the world. It reaches all the way back to the Mesolithic age, and the earliest evidences of agriculture occur some 6,000 years ago, at about 4,000 BC, in what is now Iraq. There were Mesopotamian towns and villages, crafts and trade. Writing was invented there, bronze also. And the Sumerian civilization gave way to the Akkadian, which gave way to the Babylonian, and then Assyrian civilizations. And all of these names are familiar to us from our social studies classes in 5th grade and then all the way up through high school and further education, but we don't often stop to think that what is contemporary Iraq is, in fact, that land and people with that very ancient and dignified and honorable heritage and a very long tradition of human habitation and human relation to that particular land and civilizations which have evolved in order to enable people to live in community in that kind of land. Some of the works we'll be talking about reflect that in ways, and it's important to keep that ancient history with which they live all the time in mind as we're talking about their literature. In Arab eyes, there is an Arab nation which is defined by its language and history. And so the Persians, or contemporary Iranians, are not necessarily viewed by themselves as Arabs. They speak Persian. They don't speak Arabic. But the Iraqis are people who define themselves as Arabs. The Egyptians define themselves as Arab. And Arab does not equal Muslim. There are Christian Arabs, there are Jewish Arabs, and Arabs are people who share the language and the identity with the history of people who have a very long tradition of living in the part of the world where Arabic is spoken. As we note, the contemporary turmoil in the Middle East was ignited and challenged by the installation of the State of Israel in the Holy Land. And this is a part of the world, as you know, which Muslims have dominated since Saladin defeated the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1187. So a long history of control of a part of the world was thrown out of kilter by the displacement of peoples and the emigration of peoples into what is now Israel. And we need to understand the antiquity of people's connections to that land and the passion that they bring to that when we think about that part of the world. Both the passion brought to it by Jewish people who live in that part of the world and by the Muslims and Christians in that area. I'd like to start, because we identify the Middle East so closely, primarily with the religion of Islam, by giving us a little taste of some of the literature of the Quran. And this, as you know, is the word of Allah, which was revealed to his prophet Muhammad. Yeah, and because in particular we may consider the relations between men and women, or the strictures regarding the conduct of men and women, particularly unusual or different from ours, I'd like to use some readings from the Quran which pertain to directions concerning proper conduct between men and women. There are a series of more than 100 chapters, or surahs they're called, outlining the behavior for people in all walks of life. And as I say, these revelations were made by Allah to Muhammad in the decades between 620 and 640 AD. So there's a long history of human application of these directives as well. I'd like to start by reading from a section of the Quran which talks about why men are in charge of women.
Contemporary subject.
Yes, right. Men are in charge of women because Allah hath made the one of them to excel the other, and because they spend of their property for the support of women. So good women are the obedient, guarding in secret that which Allah hath guarded. As for those for whom ye fear rebellion, admonish them and banish them to beds apart and scourge them. Then if they obey you, seek not a way against them. Lo, Allah is ever high, exalted, great. And the next chapter says, and if ye fear a breach between them twain, the man and wife, appoint an arbiter from his folk and an arbiter from her folk. If they desire amendment, Allah will make them of one mind. Lo, Allah is ever knower, aware. As you can see, these chapters end with certain formulaic statements that credit Allah and his wisdom in these pronouncements. But these are very pragmatic observations about what to do if there's trouble between a husband and wife. Well, get some of his family together, get some of her family together. And
arbitration? That sounds quite
right.
sophisticated.
Arbitration, mediation, everybody has somebody from her side or his side backing them up. So there's a process that hopefully both families will agree is fair, and the conclusion is if Allah ordains that they should be reconciled, then it will happen. So this is very comforting, reassuring information. And further information about conduct in everyday life is contained throughout the Quran. It's a very, very detailed and in many ways very pragmatic document about the proper relations between humans and between humans and the divine, and between humans and animals, how you should treat your animals, and so on. Let me read one more little section here to give a sense of that. O ye who believe, draw not unto prayer when ye are drunken, till ye know that which ye utter, nor when ye are polluted, save when journeying upon the road, till ye have bathed. And if ye be ill, or on a journey, or one of you cometh from the closet, or ye have touched women, and ye find not water, then go to high, clean soil, and rub your faces and your hands therewith. Lo, Allah is benign, forgiving. So again, talking about how you should prepare yourself for prayer and prepare yourself to commune with the divine, and this kind of commentary on various aspects of human conduct is found throughout the Quran, and makes it very interesting reading, and not identical to the Bible, but in terms of its directions about human behavior and relations.
The impulse to be clean or cleansed when praying is a common one. And the biggest difference is here in a land where water is scarce, you can do it with dirt.
Yes, very pragmatic solution to a problem. Yeah, yeah. The people who encountered Europeans, the early travelers several centuries ago, impressed the Arabs as being unclean. And that's the way we impressed the Native Americans too, as you know, when Columbus and the fellows got lost and found themselves over here, the Native Americans thought they were not nearly as clean and proper as they ought to be, and they no doubt had directions about how to conduct themselves properly, codified in their own ways as well.
I was just curious. Had you looked into the Quran before the Quran hostilities? Your interest predates the recent events. Yes,
yes. I owe a debt of gratitude to my parents for taking me to the Middle East when I was a girl of 10, and then I lived in Pakistan when I was a young teenager. I was 12, 13, and 14, and so I have a special affection for that part of the world because I've been privileged to have lived there for a little while, and I've traveled in Egypt and a little bit in Morocco and other parts of North Africa. Yeah. It's sometimes hard to find information other than National Geographic information about that part of the world, or information that makes it seem exotic, and we see those beautiful photographs, but we don't always think of the complex lives lived by the people who look so beautiful in those National Geographic photographs.
When you were talking about the ancient histories, couldn't help but think about how you mentioned the 5th grade history class or something, and I'm sure all of our students are in Fertile Crescent and Mesopotamia and origins of the alphabet and one thing and another, but it's such a, I think in a lot of our minds, Middle East is kind of a separate mythological existence. The ancient times when humankind arose, and then Well, that has nothing to do with right
Yeah,
now. You
with
know, we
real-
don't really have the connections very firmly in our minds, I think.
Right, with real lived human experience in the present. Well, I want to address that by reading some contemporary literature, and that includes some folk literature from various countries in the Middle East. So that's a nice segue you gave me, Tom. Thank you. I want to talk about the oral literature from the Middle East and give some examples of that, some of the oral tradition, and then moving down into some contemporary literature from the Middle East, including contemporary protest literature. So that's what we'll be doing during the course of this program. And to continue the illustration of ideas about women and men or girls and boys, I'd like to read a couple of Tunisian lullabies. These are contemporary Tunisian lullabies. One is a very short one, and you have to imagine it being sung by a young mother, and she's singing, "A girl child is better than 10,000 boys. If she's far away, she asks after her mother. If she's near, she brings me her love and gives me part of her food. So don't be too happy, mother of a son. My daughter will grow up and take him. She'll build her house on a hill far from you. He'll earn the living, but she'll spend it." Idea of predictions about what's going to happen here, and as you no doubt know, the birth of a boy child may be more happily celebrated than the birth of a girl, but any mother is attached to her baby, and here's the mother's response to that. And then another lullaby continues with that same commentary about boy babies or girl babies. This is also a Tunisian lullaby, and it says, "Jud Jawad, gift a gift, gift a gift. A girl is better than 1,000 boys, for if my daughter lives in town, she'll come each morning to see me. She'll comfort me when I'm ill, and if I should die, she'd mourn for a long time. Gift a gift, gift a gift. I say my son is better." You have to imagine a neighboring mother responding to this. "I say my son is better. He brings me wheat and barley. He brings me a granddaughter and a grandson who stay in my house and play together. My son wears burnouses woven with silver. Only black-eyed women are good enough for him." So the proud mothers talking about their babies in their lullabies. And I have another example of a Tunisian lullaby, which is sung as a duet with two different women singing back and forth. And again, it gives a sense of a sort of rivalry, perhaps, with the mother of a boy and the mother of a girl. And it goes, "She who gives birth to a girl deserves to be hit with a pottery mug, and her husband not to sleep with her anymore. She deserves his anger. She deserves to be tied up and hung from a vine tree. But she who gives birth to a boy deserves the minaret and the village, deserves a basket of henna, jingling anklets, a sheep slaughtered for her, great celebration, a big barbecue, and the fat tail of the sheep." That's considered the best part of the sheep. "She who brings good news of a son deserves a camel load of good things, a house facing east toward Mecca, servants and slaves, a good foreign slave, a handsome manservant. And she who bears a girl deserves a blow with a mug, deserves to stay home, to be hidden away. Ah, but don't be too happy, O mother of a son. My daughter will grow up and take him. We'll eat up the stores of her house. I'll use her oil to shine my hair, and you'll keep on nagging just like a yapping dog." So it's really intense.
Sounds like it could have been ghostwritten by Henry VIII.
It's
Is that a modern poem, or is it?
Yes, it's a contemporary lullaby from Tunisia.
It almost sounds like the author is not aware that it's the man that designates that is responsible for the sex of the child.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I wonder if that is even common knowledge.
Probably not at all, no.
It's astounding.
Yeah,
Because it's a medieval point of view.
yes, no doubt it comes from a very long oral tradition. I mean, this was recorded in 1968. That's almost, well, that's a long time. Well, it's 20 years ago now, but no doubt it's from a long oral tradition, just like most of our lullabies are. And we're talking about people, many of whom are illiterate, many of whom are unable to read. So it's quite likely that they don't know the scientific basis of sex
It's almost
selection.
horrifying ignorance, even though it's a beautiful song. It's the kind of awareness that lack of awareness that creates tremendous suffering
Yes.
for a mother who
Yes.
bears
Yes.
girls.
That's the
And for
common
the
view
little
in the
girls.
community.
Yeah.
And for
Whereas a couple of the earlier poems showed tremendous value of the human being, male or female.
Yes.
And that was refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's complex. It's not simple. Yeah. Yeah. A woman's life is very hard anywhere in the world, and some of that is reflected in these poems and traditional songs.
Compared to the last one, the earlier one about the great wonders of bearing a daughter. You know, my daughter will do this. That sounds amazingly sophisticated and exuberant.
Yes. Yeah. Compensating for the
Flying in the
other
face of
kinds
community tradition, it
disappointment.
sounds like.
And it also shows the expectations about connections among families. I mean, children are expected to look after their parents in their old age, to provide them with food and to help them. And so it shows an assumption that indeed is what will happen, and the very close knit connections between generations are implied in those poems, those lullabies. I have what I think is a very interesting Berber song from Morocco, which is called "Oh My Sister," and again it's talking a little bit about women's lives. You would imagine this being sung by a woman from the Berber mountains in that part of northern Africa. And she is saying, "My sister, don't scold me. It's true, I shouldn't have slept in the shepherd's hut. For you know, my sister, what happens in a shepherd's hut on a spring evening with a young man. Am I the only girl who ever spent the night in a young man's arms, my sister? You're telling me, my sister, that such lovely nights are not worth the morning after. Well, at least keep the secret, my sister. Old Tamucha knows all about those plants, the plants which will soon deliver me from my trouble. Nothing shows yet, you know. Tamucha has already bought the alum and resin to make me a new virginity. She's even promised to promote a marriage for me. Do you believe it? To our dear cousin. Tell me, my sister, will he make a good husband? Oh, how would we survive against men if we didn't have these tricks and smiles? Women deceivers, oh my cousin." It kind of acknowledges those pressures on women to conform to the community's standards and expectations for proper women's behavior, but the need to figure out ways around that.
Given the restrictions. It reminds me of the wife of Bath and her wild comments about the way women must manipulate men
Yeah.
to have real power.
To have real power. If they're denied public power, political power, then they have to capitalize on forms of intimate power, don't they? And here what we're reading here is about sex out of wedlock, before marriage. We're reading about an unplanned pregnancy.
And an abortion.
We're reading about an abortion. We're reading about a way of using alum and resin to restore virginity, so-called. And then we're talking about how a marriage can be arranged to a person who has for a person who's transgressed in these ways. So again,
What's the date on that?
this is contemporary. This is contemporary, and it was recorded in 1972.
Because it's from the woman's point of view, we automatically have sympathy with that voice.
Yes, that's the voice that we're concerned with. That's the protagonist here, isn't it?
And we
Yeah.
might expect to hear only the male voice, the male point of view from Muslim literature.
It's very interesting to have a chance to hear other voices and the problems that have to be addressed in real life.
Same problems addressed today.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. As we know, there is a part of the Quran which indicates that it's acceptable for a man to have up to 4 wives if he can treat them all equally, and allegedly that is possible. But one of what I think is a very touching song, one of the many touching songs, is a song about the second wife, and the protagonist here is the first wife, and so we imagine her reaction to her husband's telling her that he's decided he's going to take another wife too. And this is a Berber song again from Morocco. And the first wife sings, "The stranger has come. She has her place in the house. Her tattoos are not like ours." The Berber women have beautiful, elegant tattoo designs on hands and on faces and maybe feet also, and they're extremely elegant and beautiful. Her tattoos are not like ours, but she's young, she's beautiful, just what my husband wanted. The nights aren't long enough for their play, but we'll soon see if she's as good for work. Now she's dolled up in silks and scarves in colors brighter than bagzura feathers. But soon her skin will have to get used to rough wool, to carry the firewood, milk the cows, and cook. People are criticizing my husband, not for taking a second wife, but for bringing a stranger to our land, a stranger we don't know much about. Some say her parents were of a Tarkebut. She can't be a daughter of the 8 Tarkebut. She claims she's from the 8 Bu-o Gumez. I think she's probably from 8 Bu-Demez. Since she's come, the house is not the same, as though the door sills and the walls were sulking. Perhaps I'm the only one who notices it, like a mule before his empty manger. But I must accept my new lot, for my husband is happy with his new wife. Once I too was beautiful, but my time is past. And you must imagine that there may be many women who have felt that, whether they're not in the Middle East or not. This is a sentiment that many women have experienced, and it's expressed, I think, in a very touching way.
Good sense of loss.
Song, yeah.
Even the household items reflect.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the only one who notices though.
Yeah, right. The walls seem to be sulking. Yeah, and she'll have to get used to rough wool and milking the cows and hard work. But right now, she's in her prime.
In our culture, we don't have multiple wives, at least very often, but we have a tremendous number of middle-aged divorcees. And how similar is it to that?
Right.
Who looks at the husband's younger wife?
Right, yeah. We go in for serial monogamy,
Yeah.
not polygamy. Yeah, but I imagine that the responses are no doubt quite similar, sisters beneath the skin here, and expressed in a very, very touching way, I think, in this song. There are lots of other wonderful selections here, but I'd like to move on to a country that many Americans or North Americans know a little bit more about, and that is Egypt. Because as you said, we study the antiquities anyway of that part of the world more often. But what I want to do now is give a taste of some folk tales from Egypt, and I think that you'll see some motifs which have parallels in other folk tales around that people are familiar with. And I'd like to start with a tale that features a trickster figure who is very popular in Egypt, and his name is Goha. And this is just a quick one called Goa on the Deathbed. And Goa is a figure kind of like coyote in Native American stories. Once Goa got very ill and was about to die. He called his wife and said to her, "Beloved wife, put on your best clothes and perfume and comb your hair. In short, do all you can to look as beautiful as you can be." And she answered, sobbing, "Don't say things like that. How can I do all these things with you dying? I will never think of these things again after you have passed away." And Goa said, "Do it for me and come and sit at the head of my bed." And the woman did all she could to fix her looks and sat down next to him. She asked him, "Did you want to look at my beauty before you die?" And Goa answered, "No. They say death chooses the best. And I thought Azrael might see you and decide to take you instead of me."
Oh.
And most cultures have trickster stories.
Yeah.
The Egyptians are no different. There are some jokes about the bureaucracy in Egypt, which I think are an interesting kind of dark humor that people create in response to problems and frustrations. And this is a problem. This is a joke illustrating a problem of documentation, having the right papers. A fox was escaping from Egypt, and he was running in the western desert. He met a camel going toward Egypt. The fox stopped and said to him, "Ah, don't go to Egypt. There they get hold of camels and work them to death." The camel, frowning in amazement, said, "But why are you running away? You're not a camel." And the fox replied, "You know it and I know it, but I would have a hell of a time trying to produce the papers proving it." So they get very frustrated with the bureaucracy, just as anybody else does. And there's a whole tradition of jokes about that.
The Soviets have a tradition of that too,
Yes,
of making jokes about the bureaucracy and the government.
right.
Maybe because outward rebellion is repressed, that
Yeah.
you could do it through humor.
That conformity is important to survival,
Yeah.
but the human spirit rebels nevertheless and creates an outlet for those frustrations in that other form.
It'd be an interesting anthropological study collecting the bureaucratic tales, right?
Yes.
Do you remember
yeah.
the one about the Soviet dog after Glasnost? There's a Soviet dog on the border between Russia and China. And the Chinese dog says, "Well, are things any better after Glasnost?" And he said, "Well, the food's no better, but my chain's longer and I can bark all I want."
And some of those jokes and some of the trickster stories are like the Brer Rabbit and the
Yeah.
Tar Baby kinds of stories, aren't they? That
The use of animals is nice.
yeah. Animals can say things that sometimes humans aren't allowed to say. It's safer for the animal to say them. Again, there's a vast oral literature, and there are collections of that available in English, and I would urge people who are interested in it to read further. Before we conclude, I'd like to give a sampling of some contemporary protest literature, because political systems and life in general are particularly challenging for people in the Middle East right now. There has developed a whole body of what I would call protest literature that satirizes the system and that provides an opportunity for commentary of the sort that the jokes do, but maybe with a somewhat darker humor. And this is more painful reading. This is more painful to think about and to hear. So I want to give that caveat. I'm going to read a little bit from a book called The Secret Life of Said, the Ill-Fated Pez Optimist. And it's written by a Palestinian author called Emil Hibabi. And Said is really every person in that part of the world, but particularly every Palestinian. And he is in this chapter reporting on how his life in Israel was all due to the munificence of an ass. And he says, let's start at the beginning. My whole life has been strange, and a strange life can only end strangely. When I asked my extraterrestrial friend why he took me in, he merely replied, what alternative did you have? So when did it all begin? When I was born again, thanks to an ass. During the fighting in 1948, they waylaid us and opened fire, shooting my father, may he rest in peace. I escaped because a stray donkey came into the line of fire and they shot it, so it died in place of me. My subsequent life in Israel, then, was really a gift from that unfortunate beast. What value, then, honored sir, should we assign to this life of mine? I consider myself quite remarkable. You've no doubt read of dogs lapping up poisoned water and dying to warn their masters and save their lives, and of horses, too, racing the wind, bearing their wounded riders to safety, only to die of exhaustion themselves. But I'm the first man, to my knowledge, to be saved by a mulish donkey, an animal unable either to race the wind or to bark. I truly am remarkable. That must be why the men from outer space chose me, and this refers to other elements in the book. But tell me, please, what makes one truly remarkable? Must one be different from all the rest, or indeed be very much one of them? You said you never noticed me before. That's because you lack sensitivity, my good friend. How very often you have seen my name in the leading newspapers. Didn't you read of the hundreds imprisoned by Haifa police when that melon exploded in Hanatir Square, now Paris Square? Afterwards, every Arab they found in Lower Haifa, pedestrian or on wheels, they put in jail. The papers published the names of everyone notable who was caught, but merely gave general reference to the rest. The rest, yes, that's me. The papers haven't ignored me. How can you claim not to have heard of me? I truly am remarkable, for no paper with wide coverage, having sources, resources, advertisements, celebrity writers, and a reputation can ignore me. Those like me are everywhere. Towns, villages, bars, everywhere. I am the rest. I am remarkable indeed. That's just from the opening of this very interesting satirical book, which is a commentary on the conditions and circumstances and complexities of relationships between people in Israel. And it's particularly interesting to me because it's written from the point of view of Palestinian Arab in that part of the world. There's other much more painful material here, talking about Said's being captured and imprisoned and so on, and conversations that he has with others in prison. And basically it's a very important book that gives us access to voices that we don't often get to hear. In one section, on the road to prison, he talks with his jailers, and they with the police, and they say, "Were you ever in prison before?" And he says, "Oh no, God forbid, sir, that anyone should have beaten you to this favor. I have merely noticed, according to your account of prison rules of etiquette and behavior, that your prison treats inmates with great humanitarianism and compassion, just as you treat us on the outside. And we behave the same, too. But how do you punish Arabs who are criminals, sir?" And the answer is, "This bothers us considerably. That's why our Minister General has said that our occupation has been the most compassionate known on earth since paradise was liberated from its occupation by Adam and Eve." Among our leadership, there are some who believe that we treat Arabs inside prisons even better than we treat them outside, though this latter treatment is, as you know, excellent. These same leaders are convinced that we thus encourage them to continue to resist our civilizational mission in the new territories, just like those ungrateful African cannibals who eat their benefactors. And there's more from this author. There is also some very interesting literature of protest written by an Algerian writer named Abdellatif Laabi, and this book, which I have with me, is called Rue de la Retour. It's not easy reading because it's a voice that we're unfamiliar with, and it's talking about great pain, and it's wording the pain that we don't like to look very closely at. But I hope that this kind of quick overview of different kinds of voices from the Middle East has given you a sense of the wealth of possibilities to examine and consider and read and reflect on that as North Americans we need to learn.
I'd love to see, in addition to local newscasts, or maybe I should say network news, instead of all the pictures that we see on CNN or something else, why not readings of Muslim literature, Arab literature? Might give us a slightly better balanced picture.
Yes, that's what we need, to try to have a more balanced and complex and respectful view of other people and of ourselves as fellow creatures on the earth. Thank you for coming to talk together about this with me, and thanks for your thoughts.
Appreciate the invitation. This has certainly stirred my curiosity. I'm
Good.
anxious to borrow some of your books.
I'm glad. Thank you very much.